Hello, and I'm back this week for another episode of Menopause Conversations. My name's Angela Council, your host for this podcast. And this week I'm bringing you yet another episode in our Understanding Hormones series of different podcasts. And this week we're up to estrogen. Now, estrogen, most people are aware of the fact that estrogen shifts, and when estrogen shifts, it can change the way that we experience life, and it can cause different symptoms. So in today's episode, I will be talking about that, the role that estrogen plays, the protective nature of estrogen, the types of messages that estrogen receives and what it sends, and what happens as your estrogen levels start to shift, and most importantly, what you can do to avoid many of the common symptoms that are associated with this drop in estrogen. So enjoy this episode. I'll be back at the end to have a little bit more of a chat to you and talk to you about what else you can do going forward so that you can reduce your symptoms and learn how it is possible to navigate menopause with ease. See you soon. Bye. And I'm back for video number 3 in our hormone series. And today I'm going to talk all about estrogen. And in fact, most people think that everything to do with menopause is to do with the fact that you're losing estrogen. And that's what causes all different symptoms. Not necessarily true. And over this video and next video, I'm going to share a little bit more about what is really happening to your body. So estrogen. Estrogen is a hormone. It's a reproductive hormone. But in fact, estrogen is an umbrella term, and there's different forms of estrogen. I'm going to talk about 2 in particular. One is estradiol and the other one is estrone. Now, when you're in your full reproductive stage of life, estradiol is the predominant hormone. It's the one that it's released by the ovaries. It's what triggers eggs to be released, and it's the one that basically keeps us healthy in our reproductive life. And it's important for maintaining a really healthy metabolism. It also helps it helps us lose tummy fat as well. And it, as I said, it's at our peak during the reproductive years. And as you move into menopause, as you move through that transition through peri-menopause and into menopause, the estradiol levels start to drop. Now, they don't completely go, but they drop down to about 10% of what they were in your full years. Now, the other form of estrone that I want to talk about, or estrogen that I want to talk about, there's too many Easter words here, is estrone. Now, estrone is estrogen that's made outside of the ovaries, and as you're basically coming out of reproduction and your egg supply is dwindling and you're moving into menopause, this is where we have the shift where estradiol comes down and estrone comes up. And in our menopausal years, estrone is our dominant form of estrogen. And it is, as I said, made in other cells in the body. And in particular, where we find a lot of estrone, or where we can find a lot of estrone, is in fat cells that are held around the tummy. Now, this might start to explain as you join a few of the dots together why women tend to put weight on as they're coming through menopause. And it's big part of this is because of this shift, because it does take a while for the body to shift from estradiol to estrone. So there's a time lapse that kind of happens as one becomes more dominant than the other, as them kind of have that shift over. And in that shift over is when we find that we can actually experience different symptoms. And one of the big one that women complain about a lot is that holding of weight around the tummy, and we can't lose it. Now, it's not actually the shift in the estrogens that is causing the problem. Generally, it's actually to do with insulin resistance. That's the real problem. And because we've got this extra fat, we're storing all this extra estrone in the fat. If we didn't have the fat, we wouldn't store it. We would actually be producing it in different cells. In particular, we'd be producing it from our adrenal glands, because as we're moving into menopause, this is one of the key sites where the body starts to make a lot of estrone. It's through a process that requires the adrenal glands to be fully functioning. Unfortunately, once again, many women are highly stressed when they come to this time of life, and that means that their adrenal glands don't have the additional resources to be able to make enough estrogen so that we can let go of what's going on around it, what we're holding onto in our tummy. So when we have too much estrogen, and this can be an issue because we need to keep this in balance, because when we've got too much estrogen or too much of any type of estrogen, we have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, fibroids, heavy uncontrollable bleeding, breast cancer. So this is why we need to keep this balance working well. So we need to work on losing the tummy fat. We need to support the adrenal glands so that we can actually balance up the levels of estrogen that we need so we don't have too much, and as estradiol comes down. So what can we do to get this back into balance? And I will be talking about this a little bit more over the coming weeks, but there's a couple of things I just want to talk about. There is another type of estrogen, and that's called phytoestrogens. These are estrogens that come from plant foods. So these are very similar to our natural estrogens, and they help to balance up this imbalance between estradiol and estrone. And if you're low in estrogen, they will actually basically increase the potency of what you've got. If you've got too much, they will bring you down. And the majority of people actually have too much. So estrogen dominance is a real issue, and I'm going to be talking about that next week. But phytoestrogens do help to balance out, and you can get phytoestrogens, as I said, from plants. And I use something called seed cycling, and it's full of 4 really high phytoestrogen plants: sesame, sunflower, pumpkin seeds, and the last one just went out of my head. There's one more seed as well, linseeds. So those 4 seeds, and we alternate them through your cycle to actually help to balance up your estrogen levels. And we also get phytoestrogens in lots of leafy green vegetables. So if we're eating lots of plant foods, we'll be getting a good balance of phytoestrogens. We need to reduce our stress so that our adrenal glands can do what it needs to do to balance up the production of hormone. We need to be moving our body, and we need to support our liver so that we can actually detoxify what we don't want, so we don't have too much. And I will be talking about this more next week. So it is important that we support the liver, because the liver is where all the balancing of hormones happened. So if you do happen to get low estrogen, some of the symptoms, common symptoms of low estrogen, and this is what happens as the estradiol levels are coming down, but your estrogen levels might not be where they need to be. But some of the common symptoms, hot flushes, but the hot flushes actually happen as hormones drop. Now, estrogen does go up and down quite a lot in the perimenopause stage of life. So hot flushes will happen as you go from a high to a low, and then you come back up to a high, and then you go down to a low. So you have this cycle of hot flushing going on. Also lowers your libido because testosterone plays a big role in this as well. Once again, I'll be covering that in another video, but testosterone does play a role in that. In that testosterone is also, we can actually make estrone from testosterone. And so as our estrogen levels come down, we can lose libido, have vaginal dryness, urinary tract infections. Breasts can start to get a little bit smaller. For some women, they think that's great. Other women, not quite so great. We also tend to lose collagen. And that's what keeps our skin quite elastic, and we can start to get wrinkles and things like that. And I actually notice it a lot because I've lost weight, and I've got a bit of saggy skin because I've lost collagen. Sometimes it worries me, but other times it doesn't too much. I just keep building muscles out to put muscles back in there and fill it back out again. It can also shift your mood, your memory. You can get very distracted. It also lose motivation. Can decrease your bone density, and all of this happens until the estrogen levels balance up, and that kind of happens as you get through perimenopause and you're into postmenopause. So once you're in postmenopause, a lot of these symptoms all start to settle down. You can have times when you have no periods, so longer time between your periods, sleep issues, and increased sweating. So this is what's happening as estrogen is dipping, then coming up and dipping and coming up. So that's where we can get a whole pile of different symptoms. But as I said, eating a good diet full of lots of plants, reducing your stress, moving your body, supporting your liver, so that's reducing as many chemicals from your body, will make a big difference. The body knows what to do. If we just provide it with the raw materials, it knows what to do. Sometimes we need to step in and do a little bit extra of concerted, like therapeutic type work. But other than that, if you're just putting the nutrients in, it'll work itself out. It really is really clever like that. I think we've been, we've disconnected from the way our bodies work, and we haven't been taught the way our bodies work. And the medical system has basically taken that power away from us. But we really do need to trust that our bodies know what to do. All we need to do is provide it with the nutrition, the movement, the fresh air, all of that, and it will work itself out. Before we were here, we still survived before we had all of this knowledge. Now we've got this knowledge and we think that our bodies have lost their ability to do what it needs to do. I know that was just a little bit of a side rant. I will be back next week, and I'm going to be talking to you about something called estrogen dominance. And this is something, because everyone worries about estrogen levels coming down. For the majority of people, estrogen levels coming down is not a concern. Most women have estrogen dominance. They actually have too much estrogen. And that's what I'm going to be talking about next week, and really explaining why it's important that we actually, in some cases, drop the estrogen levels, because having too much estrogen causes lots and lots of issues, also increases our risk of some very serious diseases. Hi, it's Angela back again. So what did you think of that episode? Now do you have a better understanding of the role of estrogen and what happens as our estrogen levels start to shift? And sometimes they're going up, they're not actually going down. And that's what a lot of women don't really understand, in that hormones, particularly estrogen, goes up and down. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about not just the hormones, but what actually we need to be addressing to get our hormones back into balance, because we can sit there and we can blame everything on our hormones. But as I've said several times, hormones are simply messengers. So we need to make sure that the right messages are getting to the different organs, because, and that the hormones are actually carrying the right messages. And when they're carrying the right messages and everything is in balance, you don't experience symptoms. So if you want to understand more and go deeper below the hormones, I do have a free workshop coming up called The Secret to Thriving in Menopause Workshop. Now, it kicks off on the 8th of May, and you can register for that. It is free, and the link for that is bit.ly, so bit.ly/menopause with a capital M _workshop with a capital W. So bit.ly/menopause _workshop. You can go and you can register for that. And as I said, we'll be kicking off in May, and that runs for over 5 days. Now, if you're listening to this podcast away from, the timing of this particular workshop, go to that link anyway, because you can put yourself on the wait list for the next workshop. So I run these workshops every 10 weeks or so. So if you've just missed out on this one, put yourself on the wait list for the next one. In the workshop, what I do is I go beyond the hormones, and I go deeper than the hormones. And in these podcasts, I'm sharing with you about the hormones, but we start to tackle why hormones are out of balance, and the key reason is to do with stress. But it's the stress that you can control. What can you do to bring stress down in your life? And that is the food that you eat, the way you move your body, being exposed to different toxins in the environment, the stress of your life, and also your mindset. And we go into that in a lot more depth, and also start to look at what is the right solution for you, because everyone's kind of looking for the solution that works for everyone. And I'm going to be honest, there is no single solution that works for everyone, because not every woman's experience of menopause is the same. Women have different symptoms, it starts at different times. There's just so many different things going on. So we can't come up with a single one pill solution that works for everyone. And in fact, I don't. I look at the individual, and in particular we start to look at what your genetic blueprint is. And when we can understand your genes, the genes play a really, really big role. When I talk about genes, I'm not talking about the ones you're wearing, I'm talking about your genetic makeup plays a really big role on when it comes to determining what the right food for you to eat is, the best way for you to move, all of this. So this is what I'm going into in detail in this free workshop. You'll get to learn what the right solution for you is, and you'll actually get to create your own menopause blueprint, so your own solution that will work for you, and it won't be the same for everybody. So once again, if you want to register for that, we kick off on the 8th of May, and the link is bit.ly, so bit.ly/menopause with a capital M _workshop with a capital W. It's important you put those caps in. Go there, register, and let's learn a little bit more about how your body works, how your body's experiencing menopause, and what you can do to change all of that, because I want you to be able to thrive in menopause, not just merely get through it and kind of struggle your way through it. It is possible to thrive. I've done it, my clients have done it, and I'm going to share with you the secret that when you understand this was something you're not going to be hearing anywhere else, but it will just change the way you look at menopause. Now, just before I go, if you are enjoying these different episodes where I'm talking about the hormones and even some of the guests that I've got along, please share this podcast with your friends, other women who you think would be interested in learning more about menopause. Let's have this conversation so it's not a big secret. Let's bring menopause out of the closet and start to talk about it. So please share this with this particular episode, any episode, with your friends. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave me a rating and review. That would be absolutely fantastic, because that's how other women get to find this particular podcast, so that more women can understand how it's possible to navigate this time of life with ease. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye for now.